to be able to share with this amazing community, the Open Security Summit. For sure, this is something that is adding a lot of value to persons within the information technology space. So, as is seen on the screen, I am Richea Perry, and I am passionate about cybersecurity and GRC. And I, from time to time, do my best to add value wherever I can within the community, as best as I can, just to share my experiences. What I will be looking at or presenting is practical approach or considerations to developing a cybersecurity program. And that's very important to recognize, practical approach. This is the information that I will be sharing is not something that is cast in stone, as they would say, but this is rather my experience. So you are able to do further research. I mean, do not take everything that I say. This is just me sharing with you all the things that I do, my thought process in terms of when I sit within an organization, when I sit, for example, with a client to take into consideration all the things, all the elements. So going forward in this presentation, then I want you to just see this as view this as a situation in which I'm actually sitting in an organization with, for example, senior management or a customer or a client, and we are pretty much walking through all the things that one needs to consider in terms of developing a cybersecurity program. And one might ask, why cybersecurity program? But when we really look at what is happening within the industry today in terms of the cyberspace, we recognize that with the increase in technology and the various elements, applications, hardware changes that are happening within the various industries, various enterprises, then there has to be a mechanism, a platform that governs or helps an organization to keep resilient in light of all the various threats and risks that are associated with the various attacks that can actually affect an organization from carrying out their day-to-day task. Now, what we're going to be doing, or what I seek to do, is pretty much treat with this by giving us a case scenario. So we're going to be just walking through a case scenario and putting ourselves in this situation. And the case that I present is pretty much saying that, let's say you are given a task as a cybersecurity professional within an organization, right? So you're asked by, maybe you're consulted or you are the cybersecurity expert in your organization to develop a cybersecurity program for the organization. Bearing in mind, this is not something that you have done before. So the big question is, where do you start? So pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, I am yet to find a system online that you can plug in a few values and then it say, here you go, this is a cybersecurity program. I'm yet to find that system. Or you may decide to consult your friends and say, all right, can you share your cybersecurity program with me? Well, maybe that will work to some extent, or it might not work. Or one of the best options, maybe not the best options, but one of the things that a lot of us would do, talking about even from my experience, is simply go to Google or whichever search engine that you prefer, right? And what I did was to pretty much look at a number of search results that speaks to developing a cybersecurity program for an organization. And you will be seeing a number of options. One of the first set of steps that I found, the first one is saying that in order to develop a cybersecurity program, then you, one, organize your data, identify where this data is stored, and then one, assets, catalog all hardware and software, employ training, implement MFA, celebrate security. Interesting. And it goes on to saying, a second set of results that I found was identify your assets and the cyber threats they face. Take your assets against cyber threats. Detect cyber incidents, respond to cyber incidents, and the list goes on. And the question that comes out from all of this is, by looking at these steps, can you, without having that experience, simply develop a cybersecurity program? And based on my experience, as this information is presented, then there's no way you will be able to holistically create a cybersecurity program that is efficient and effective in meeting the challenges that an organization is having. There are a number of other elements that are required. There are a number of things that you would need to take into consideration. There are a number of steps. The thought process that is involved in developing a cybersecurity program goes beyond and outside of simply listing a few steps. And looking at these items, from my perspective, I could easily put all of this information into a deeper context and perspective in terms of building out a cybersecurity program. But for someone who has not done something like this before, or is not experienced with developing a cybersecurity program, then simply looking at this list of activities or tasks will not be an easy task to complete within an organization. Bearing in mind that you are the cybersecurity professional that is employed and you are being tasked with carrying out this duty, then you are not able to say outsource, but you now have to show your skills to the organization that you are competent enough to execute such a huge activity. So with that said, this is what I want to bring your attention to. When you're given a task as a cybersecurity professional, not just to, in the scenario we are trying to develop a cybersecurity program for an organization, and more specifically, we're going to be looking further as we go along into developing this cybersecurity program practically for a particular industry. But just sit tight as we go through this process. So one of the things I do in terms of whatever security, cybersecurity task that I am doing within an organization, I always try to have a 360-degree holistic approach of all the layers, all the things that I am working with that you can find within an organization. Not just to have a tunnel vision to say, I am working to develop a cybersecurity program, but being a competent or efficient, holistic cybersecurity professional, then you want to have an understanding of all the elements in terms of the security stack and how all these things work together. And having that 360 degrees is pretty much of an understanding of your network security, your data security, infrastructure security, system security, application security, mobile security, the GRC aspect of the organization, which pretty much fuels and binds together, creating that structure for all the elements within that organization, and also looking at the advanced threat protection. So when you have that holistic approach to cybersecurity, then you are now able to efficiently take into consideration a number of things at a deeper level than, for example, in this case that I mentioned earlier, for example, it is far much different from just selecting a few items from the internet to say, yes, let us go and develop a cybersecurity program. It goes far beyond that. So it requires us having that holistic approach of all the vital elements that come together to create that machinery in terms of securing an organization. Okay, so with that said, then let us go into a more practical aspect of things. All right, so let me know if you are seeing my screen. Are you seeing this Excel screen?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So what we're going to be doing is treating with this as if we are pretty much working from a blank sheet of paper. So one of the things is that I simply take my Excel sheet, whatever works best for you. This is my working file, and there are a number of important questions that I think needs to be answered as we go along in this process. And pretty much what I'm going to be doing is just type in these, right? So we just want to get an understanding of a number of terms to understand, right? So we're pretty much just working through the process. And then let's just say this is description, right? And there are a number of things that we want to understand at this point. And just to kind of fast track things a little bit, let me just copy this from my notepad. So, all right. And we're going to be making this far. Let me just maximize this so everyone is able to see better. All right. So let us have our terms to understand our description, because there are a number of things that we need to get out of the way, right? So one of the first thing is that what is a cybersecurity program? All right. So as we sit down, we need to ensure that everyone have an understanding. And pretty much when you talk about our cybersecurity program, laying the foundation, right? I always like not to take anything for granted or to assume anything. And pretty much a cybersecurity program for me is a collection of microprocesses working together under the supervision of policies and procedures and standards that help the organization to operate safely in terms of meeting its business or organizational objectives in a way that safeguards the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data within the organization. And there are a number of other definitions. And another way to look at it is that a cybersecurity program is a documented set of your organization's information security policies, as I've mentioned, guidelines. It acts as that roadmap, right, for effective security management practices and controls within that organization. That is pretty much what it is, right? So your cybersecurity program, as the name suggests, is a program, and it is not a project, because there's a difference, right? It has to be seen as a program. A project is a one-time, one-off event. A program is a continuous process that involves a number of elements that one has to do and monitor over a period of time, right? So programs deliver outcomes, but projects deliver outputs. And by that, I mean that the outcomes are what the business wants or needs to achieve, while the outputs are the actions or items that contribute to achieving that particular outcome for your cybersecurity program. And the next question to that to follow up as it relates to that is very important is that we go along this process, right? Are you developing this program for a small to medium size or large organization? That has to be taken into context. Are you developing this program to meet these sort of organizations, right? And also, how do we go about developing policies, procedures, guidelines, and standards if we do not have an understanding of all the elements that work together to make that organization functions in terms of the program that we are trying to develop to support the security challenges or risk exposures that exist within that organization. So bearing those things in mind, as I said before, this is my thought process. There are no more other different ways of doing this, different methods. So this is pretty much how I sit and how I think about and put things into perspective whenever it is that I'm developing a cybersecurity program. Now, the next task that I want to do is to develop what is called my working file. All right, so pretty much working file, you create your Excel sheet. And to your working file will, let me quickly just share this, my working file with you as we quickly walk through this. And right, so this is my working file. It's a typical working file. Things to be done, right? So one of the first things that you want to do is to get to know your environment. And if we look back at the activities that were listed from the Google search, then you might not see this coming out. Get to know your environment. And when I talk about your environment, you're talking about your people, the technology, the process, understanding the business, the mission goals, all of these elements that work together within that particular organization. You have to understand that. You cannot start developing a cybersecurity program without taking these things into perspective, because the cybersecurity program must be in line with helping the organization to achieve its business or organizational objectives in terms of the how that company or organization operates. So that's very important. And what I normally do is to develop my action steps. And in my action steps, one of the first things, in order to get to know your environment, then you do what is called your cyber maturity assessment, right? And if you look at all these details, and as I said before, I'm just quickly just going through this at a higher level. I also have a comprehensive course in which I actually goes through this more thoroughly. So there are action steps. This is where you pretty much ask all the probing questions. When I sit in an organization and I'm tasked, I ask all probing questions. And by probing questions, right? So you conduct your security, and this is done to identify things like gaps, compliance. You want to assess your skill of cyber, the vulnerabilities. But in order to get to know my environment, I have actually created a list of questions that I would ask, depending on the nature of the environment. And this is where your leadership skills, your soft skills comes into being. You're a cybersecurity professional, then you need to know how to relate to people at all levels in order to pull and to get all the details that you need to put together your program. Because at the end of the day, what you want is to be able to present the details to the powers that be, senior management, so that you are able to get their consensus and their buy-in as to why it is that they need to be implementing a cybersecurity program within your organization. That's one of the key objectives. So having done all of this work, you must be able to present, to say, here are my findings, here are the risk. This is why you need to be putting a cybersecurity program into place in light of all the attack surfaces and challenges or threats to the organization. So no more probing questions. Some of these questions, questions such as what devices are connected to this network? Let's say you're new to the environment, so you're sitting down with your IT guys, your engineers, and you want to pull from, you have to get as much information from all departments. So things such as how many devices are connected to your network, what are the attack vectors associated with the environment, what does the threat landscape looks like for this environment, what protocols are being used, what applications are being used on both servers and endpoints, what operating systems are being used, things such as VLANs, or do you have VLANs, security measures? Is it network segregated? Do we have security policies, procedures? Do we have, risk management policies in place? Is a risk management program in place? Data leak prevention policies, and the list goes on. So you have to spend time to ask all those probing questions to have a comprehensive, holistic approach to developing a cybersecurity program. So it is not just about picking a few items from the internet and to say, yes, I have a security program. It's always good to have a large view of this process, right? So once you're able to design a cybersecurity program to deal with the challenges of a large organization, and it's easy for you to break that down into smaller subsets for various groups or smaller organizations, right? So when you have that holistic approach, then you ask a lot of questions that help you to put together the necessary things, right? So in order for an information security program to be effective, then as I mentioned, it must be aligned with the business. And this is very important. And this is something that I always do when developing cybersecurity programs. And let me quickly get back to sharing this screen with you. So let's say in getting to know your environment, then for sure, there are a number of environments that you could be developing a cybersecurity program for. The business or the organization, for example, right? So this could be, this is just a typical example of your on-premise. So it could be an on-premise environment, right? It could be in a cloud environment, and you could also have, right? Let's change this. You could also have a multi-cloud environment, right? So we have a multi-cloud environment. So you have, for example, Azure, GCP, and this could also be a cloud environment. Then you could also have an hybrid environment. So that's on-premise plus cloud, hybrid. Or you could also have a multi-cloud environment, or you could also have just a regular on-premise environment. So you have to now take into account in what environment is this company, is this business, is this organization operating in, so that I can bear in mind that the environment brings with it its own challenges, its own risk, its own attack vectors. So when you take these things into perspective, then you're now able to develop a cybersecurity program that addresses the challenges that are faced in these various environments that the business, company, or organization can operate from. All right. So having done that, having got that out of the way, then the next thing I do, I moved on to conducting a research of the industry. You have to understand the industry, the nature of the organization. the space? Is it mining? Is it finance? Is it the medical or the industry? Is it automotive industry? Is it the pharmaceutical industry? These are things that you need to research your industry. And then I move on to finding out what are the most common threats or attack vectors associated with this industry. What are the regulatory and compliance requirements for this industry, right? What are the cybersecurity defense considerations for such industry? These are the things that you would put into consideration. And as you go along, then you want to do things such as conduct your risk assessment. And this is pretty much to find out all those critical data assets. What are those associated risks based on the, so identify your assets, critical data assets, what are the risks that are associated with all of these data assets within the organization. Then you want to do your business impact analysis, right? And this is how I pretty much just make my notes. As you go along in the process, creating that sheet, then you're going to be formulating a proper document from all of this, your notepad, as I would say, that you have all of this information listed on. Do your gap analysis. And when you do a gap analysis, you're basically looking at the status of the organization in terms of its security maturity, where the company is at now and where they need to go, looking at the controls. What is that needs to be done to get that company to that level of security maturity? And that is where you're now going to be seeing, based on the risk, what controls, what policies, what procedures, all of these things that will be required as part of your security program to be implemented. All right. So once that is done, your gap analysis, right? Then the next thing that I do is, once I formulate all of this in a proper document, I then present the findings to the board or the powers that be to say, look, this is the nature of your environment. These are the risks. These are the things that can happen to your organization if these risks are not dealt with or the proper controls are not put in place to deal with all of these challenges. This is where your security, your maturity is in terms of cybersecurity or information security, and where it is that you want to go. Once that information is presented, then, and the approvals are given, right? As I would mention before, once the approvals are then given to say, all right, go ahead, implement your cybersecurity program. At this point, then all the information that has been presented, right, will help me to determine what it is that I now need to incorporate in my cybersecurity program. All right, bearing in mind that depending on the nature of the organization, there are a number of elements that can be placed inside your program. Going back to my original definition, it's a collection of microservices. That's how I look at your security program. Within that huge program, you have small programs that are responsible for various tasks that are then monitored. And then for those tasks, you have various policies, procedures that governs how it is that you go about ensuring that these things are achieved. All right. And as we go along, you recognize that your program now will involve a number of smaller programs. That's how I normally look at it, your microservices. This is where you have things such as vendor risk management, your configuration management program, change management program, incorporating a patch management program, vulnerability management, business continuity planning. All of these elements will be treated as entities in of themselves, or activities or tasks that needs to be documented, in which you have all the processes, you have all the resources, all the steps, all the persons, all the necessary elements that are geared towards achieving these programs that form that overall cybersecurity program. Now, one of the easiest methods of developing a cybersecurity program for an organization is to adopt a cybersecurity framework, right? So far, we have actually used a holistic approach, meaning that I pretty much give an understanding of how I think, taking things, thinking broad, digging deep to ensure that I have a comprehensive grasp of what it is that I'm working with. Once I have that understanding, once management gives the approval, then I know, look at the industry to see if it is that they are a regulated industry, if they need to meet certain compliance regulations. And the example that I'll be using in this case is that we are working with a medical institution, right? An institution in the medical industry. And in most cases, an organization within the medical industries need to be HIPAA compliant, right? And in such case, then your cybersecurity program must be guided or must be built on this framework that helps the organization to meet its compliance regulations. And in most cases, as it relates to adopting frameworks, you can integrate frameworks to give you that that more efficient delivery of a cybersecurity program. So in this case, what I'm going to be doing is looking at the mapping of your NIST cybersecurity framework along with the HIPAA compliance framework. So that is that integrated approach. So by using these two framework or structures, I am now able to build that cybersecurity program under the guidance of established practices, industry best practices, or activities that are being developed to guide, for example, this particular industry to achieve compliance and also a level of stability. So there are two ways we can look at this. We can also look at mapping HIPAA rules, security rules to NIST, or we can look at mapping NIST to HIPAA security rules. Whichever, at the end of the day, we are still meeting those same objectives of developing a cybersecurity program that quickly allows the organization to identify, to be able to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover quickly in the event of an incident that impacts the operation of that organization. And that is what we try to achieve when I put together a cybersecurity program. So having done all of this, you have your framework, take into consideration all these programs that need to be done. Then the next phase I look at is then the implementation, right? This is very important, right? So strategies lead to planning and planning leads to programs. Therefore, you have to have a plan for the implementation or implementing the program. And this is where they say the tire hits the road, the practical aspects of things, right? And there are a number of things that you have to take into consideration when it comes on to implementing your program, right? So pretty much that's in a nutshell, I would say at an high level, all my consideration, the thought process that is involved when it is that I am going through the process of putting together and implementing a cyber security program for mid-size, medium-size, or enterprise organization. The concepts remain the same, having that holistic approach. And with that said, then that would have brought us the end of my presentation.
Very cool. Can you hear me? Hello? So can you hear me? I think there's an issue with Richie. If I'm sending a message. Oh, wait, a great presentation.
Wow.
We can hear. Yeah, so can you hear me better?
Oh, yes. I'm hearing you now.
Yeah. So this is a great presentation,
Yes.
right? With really amazing concepts, right? So what's the next level, right? So you did this in spreadsheets, right? Which is, one of my nemesis, but in some ways it works for these things. But how do you, for example, connect your programs to NIST?
Can you just, I am just, I don't know what's happening with my internet connection.
Okay, so I have a question. So how to connect your programs, projects to NIST?
Oh, okay. In terms of connecting the cybersecurity program to NIST is that you would use, in this case, you are working with the medical industry. So what I did was to align the HIPAA compliance with the NIST security framework, and then using all the requirements of that framework. Bearing in mind that, for example, let me share this document. For example, these are the requirements of the HIPAA framework. So all of these, for example, this represents the identify stage, which is part of NIST cybersecurity framework. So by achieving these elements, these standards, and there are a number of instructions that tells you what it is that you need to do, what documents that you need to be producing, what activities. So they're pretty much guidelines that tells the organization or the person that is developing your cybersecurity program, what are the elements that they need to have inside that program in order to help the organization to meet that level of compliance. Not certain if I answered your question.
Cool. Well, I don't think there are more questions. So let's wrap it up. And any final thoughts? This is really a good session. Same that he can't really fully hear my questions because I want to have a couple more threads with him. Okay. Well, thanks everybody.
Guys, well, it was indeed a pleasure for me, always sharing. I look forward to future presentations, and just to wish you guys a wonderful and happy new year when it comes.
Cool.